Diddy die, die, da dee die, ay, ay, da dee die, ay, ay, da 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 dee da da. Diddy die, die, da dee die, ay, ay, da dee die, ay, ay, da 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 dee da da. Diddy die, die, da dee die, ay, ay, da dee die, ay, ay, da 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 dee da da. Diddy die, die, da dee die, ay, ay, da dee die, ay, ay, da 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 dee da da. Diddy die, die, oh, diddy die, die, oh, diddy die, die, oh, diddy die, die, la la la, diddy die, die. Diddy die, die, oh, diddy die, die, oh, diddy die, die, oh, diddy die, die, la da da, diddy die, die, diddy die, die, da dee.
בשמחה, בוא לפניו יננה, ידעו את השם בשמחה, בוא לפניו, ידעו את השם בשמחה, בוא לפניו יננה, ידעו את השם בשמחה, בוא לפניו. דעו כי השם הוא האלוקים, הוא עשנו, לא אנחנו, דעו כי השם הוא האלוקים, אנחנו אוהב צבא איתו.
לפניו ברננה,
עמדו את השם בשמחה, בוא לפניו ברננה, בוא לפניו,
בוא לפניו,
בוא לפניו ברננה. בשמחה, בוא לפניו ברננה, בוא לפניו,
בוא לפניו,
בוא לפניו ברננה. עבדו את השם בשמחה, בוא לפניו ברננה, עבדו את השם בשמחה, בוא לפניו, עבדו את השם בשמחה, בוא לפניו ברננה, עבדו את השם בשמחה, בוא לפניו. השם הוא אלוהים, הוא עשנו, לא אנחנו, כי השם הוא אלוהים, אנחנו עמו וצומח איתו.
Erev Tov and good evening, everyone. My name is Rabbi Yonah Berman, and it is an honor and a pleasure to welcome you to Yeshivat Chovevei Torah Rabbinical School's annual evening of celebration. Tonight is a night when we look back, when we experience the present, and we look to the future. We imagine all of the wonderful things that YCT will continue to bring to the world as we reflect on all that it has already brought to the Jewish world over the past 2 decades. What better way to consider where we have been, where we are, and where we are going than to look at 3 of our amazing graduates, 3 rabbis, 3 musmachim, who are contributing so much to the world and to their communities. And so I invite you to join me as we start off by visiting Rabbi Ari Hart, Skokie Valley, Agudath Jacob in Chicago, Illinois.
So it's my interview Shabbos here at Skokie Valley Agudath Jacob, and I'm trying out to be the rabbi. This is 2 years ago. And as I'm walking up these steps, I have this flashback. I all of a sudden picture myself walking up these very same steps as a 13-year-old going to a bat mitzvah party, and I have a Green Day CD in my hands. And I'm just taken aback. Wow, what a journey it's been over those 25 years. A journey made possible by Yeshivat Chovevei Torah. I grew up here. This is home. I grew up in the Chicago Jewish community. I was a spiritual kid. I had a lot of questions. I had a lot of emunah, a lot of faith. But as I got a little bit older, I actually started to struggle with emunah, struggle with my faith. In high school and college, I actually left religion completely. I had a lot of questions about orthodoxy and Torah and justice, and I didn't feel like I was getting answers that were satisfactory. After I graduated college, I started to return to my Jewish roots. I started to think that maybe there was more to our great Masorah than I was aware of at the age of 13 when I stopped becoming religious. In the process of my reconnecting and rediscovering Judaism, Rabbi Josh Fagelson, an amazing musmach of Chovevei Torah, sat me down and he asked me 2 questions. He said, 1, would you ever think about becoming a rabbi? And 2, have you ever heard of a yeshiva called Yeshivat Chovevei Torah? As soon as I walked in the Beit Midrash, I knew that I'd found my home. Learning at Chovevei gave me space not just to think about Torah issues and moral issues and world issues, but also to take action, to lead. We as students were also given opportunities by the yeshiva to go out there and to change the world. And I'm forever grateful for that. I got married while I was a student at Chovevei. After I finished my training at Chovevei, I spent 5 amazing years in Riverdale serving at the HIR. Then I made a big move. I came here to Skokie. I'll be honest, coming back home to this shul initially was a bit of a gamble, but I knew that there was a core of visionary, dedicated lay leaders who were hungry for a rabbi who brought the perspective of Chovevei to this community, who could be orthodox but inclusive, who could be rigorously grounded and rooted in halacha, but also open to questions and struggles and doubts and diversity. I knew that there was a need for this, and I knew that I had the education and the experiences to be a rabbi for that kind of a community. And so we took the leap, and thank God it's been amazing.
Our membership has grown beyond our wildest dreams. We have had 100+ new families join in the past 3 years. Our membership continues to grow, and we are thriving in a time when not every organization is thriving.
Rav Ari has brought together people from all walks of life and all different backgrounds and helped raise the bar.
He brought a whole new level and dimension of thinking beyond just the scope of the traditional experience in shul. How we can affect the world around us and not just look inwardly, but really look outwardly.
This is the vision for an orthodoxy that goes out into the world and makes a difference, that takes the Torah and its values and doesn't just relegate them to the sanctuary of Beit Midrash, but it makes a Torah that speaks to the world, that changes the world, that impacts people where they are. It's not enough to just do mitzvot. We also have to be out there feeding the poor and the homeless and helping those who are in need.
I think in the past, our rabbinical schools just didn't train the rabbis the way they needed to be trained, and they didn't have these skills to be successful. And we owe a lot to Chovevei Torah for giving Rabbi Hart these skills.
That combination of deep rootedness in text, of hours and hours in the Beit Midrash, and hours struggling and working through the problems of the human condition, There's no rabbinic education now or ever that's been like that. Chovevei is an amazing, trailblazing, one-of-a-kind institution. Chovevei lit a light in me. It lit a light that I tried to give off and share with others. It lit a light that made me a better professional, a better rabbi, but also personally, a better human being, a better Jew, a better husband, a better father. I'm forever grateful to the education, the relationships, the friendships that Chovevei Torah blessed me with. Thank you.
Wow. Rav Ari, the work that you've done in building and transforming that community is so inspiring. And knowing all that your community has gone through over the past year, and knowing that despite or perhaps because of all of that, you have continued to grow, continued to flourish, and continue to contribute so much to the Chicago Jewish community, we are so grateful to count you as one of our graduates tonight. I'd like us to turn now and go across the ocean to our beloved Eretz Yisrael and to Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh as we join Rabbi Mishael Zion.
I think what Israel really needs is resilient communities and vibrant Jewish life. The people who should have the tools to lead Israel for vibrant communities and resilient Jewish life are rabbis, men, women in the Orthodox community and beyond it, having the tools to build communities of listening, of chesed, of Torah, and of gemilut chasadim. My name is Rabbi Mishael Zion, and I'm the co-founder of the YCT Beit Midrash for Rabbinic Leadership in Israel. For me, the story really starts with the neighborhood of Talpiot. This is where I was born and grew up. But I never thought I would return to this neighborhood. It always felt like the end of the world. Synagogues were always in the other neighborhoods. We had to walk for half an hour to get to where we could daven with people who were like-minded and thinking about Judaism in the way we did. But when we returned from our time in New York, and after I studied at Chovevei Torah, we quickly discovered that here, Talpiot is where we want to live, where we want to raise our daughters, and where we started a shul, the Klausner Minyan. After our first daughter was born, I realized that what I really wanted to do was figure out how to connect Torah and life and bring those two together. And that's really what rabbinic work is all about. But unfortunately, the Torah institutions here in Israel know how to teach Talmud and Halacha, but there's no place that trains people with the skills of how to be a community rabbi, what it means to be a rabbi, or even why someone would want to become a Rav b'Yisrael. And that's where I found myself traveling to America and visiting Yeshivat Chovevei Torah, which had just opened a few years before. And I remember meeting Rabbi Avi Weiss, the founder of Chovevei, and telling him of my dream to study how to be a community rabbi here in America and bring it back to Israel. And he said, I'm sorry, we don't do that. We know how to train American rabbis. And I remember telling him, you know, Rabbi Avi, the translation is on me. You teach me the skills of being an American community rabbi, and I'll figure out how to translate that to Israel. I remember our first class with Dr. Michelle Friedman, and she said, you know, people often become rabbis because they're told that they know how to speak so well. But I'll tell you the truth, most people speak to rabbis because they want to feel heard. In my class, you're going to learn how to listen. That's when I knew Yeshivat Chovevei Torah was the place for me. I love my work at the Klausner Minyan, but one of the things I'm proudest of in the last few years is starting the YCT Beit Midrash for Rabbinic Leadership here in Israel. A few years ago, I met with Rav Linzer at a cafe here in Jerusalem, and he told me there was a group of rabbinically ordained Talmidei Chachamim who were curious about what it is that they teach at YCT, and could they also get some of the training to be a rabbi. And when I heard this, I have to say I was really excited, because this was my journey as well, having come from the world of the yeshivot in Israel to try and uncover what is it that we can learn from the North American Jewish community. And I immediately called my friend Rav Eli Ofran, who's the rabbi of Kibbutz Yavne, and told him, would you join me in this project of helping young Israeli rabbis really develop their place as community rabbis? He immediately said yes. We're in the second cohort of the program now, and each year we've had 12 young rabbis. Some of them work in schools, some lead shuls, some teach at yeshivot, others work in not-for-profits, trying to figure out how do we build a thicker Jewish community life here in Israel. What we do on the program is we basically ask three basic questions. What is a rabbi? What is a community? What is Am Yisrael? By asking those three questions again and again, our participants slowly build up their own sense of what their rabbinic identity is, what their rabbinic mission is, and how they can work better to build community here in Medinat Yisrael. We meet every Thursday and we study together different issues of pastoral counseling, of Torah and modernity, of the challenges of a community life. Alongside our weekly sessions is a 10-day chaplaincy course, one of the first of its kind here in Israel, led by YCT's own Rabbi Mike Schultz. And finally, a trip to the United States, a 10-day trip, kind of a reverse birthright, visiting Riverdale and Yeshivat Chovevei Torah, studying in the Beit Midrash, davening with the HIR and with other synagogues in the community, and spending another Shabbat in a different community outside of New York to get to know different models of rabbinic leadership. In between, they met rabbis from different denominations, leaders in the Orthodox community and far beyond the Orthodox community to try and learn and understand better what is the story of American Jewry and what can we, Israeli Jews, learn from American Jews. I use what I learned at Chovevei Torah every day in my rabbinic work, in my cultural work. I'm proud to be able to help train the next generation of rabbis and bring the tools that have been developed for so long in the American Jewish community here in Israel in order to really serve all of Klal Yisrael.
Thank you, Rav Mish. And I want to say what a privilege it is to work with you as a colleague in building and expanding Yeshivat Chovevei Torah's programming in Eretz Yisrael. We've accomplished so much together, and I look forward to continuing our work together in the future. We turn now to our colleague, Rabbi Shmuly Yanklowitz in Phoenix, Arizona, for one final video.
There's a lot of things that keep me up at night, including little babies. But the issue among issues that kept me up at night the most has always been vulnerable children. Children who are abused or neglected. Our tradition is about orphans. Baby Moses is raised outside of his home. Esther loses her parents and is raised by Mordechai.
It's about time that the Jewish community is stepping up for those within our community and sometimes outside of our community that are in need of loving support during the most challenging times of adoption and foster care.
I was a member of the first cohort of Yatom. I entered the cohort as a single woman in grad school. I was really only interested in private adoption at the time. I was kind of scared of foster care. However, through the rabbi's experiences, words of wisdom, and connections in the child welfare system, I really learned about the at-risk youth in our community. And it kind of made foster care a little less scary for a single woman. It also opened my eyes to how I could impact the world one foster placement at a time. In total, I have had 4 foster placements, and I've had 1 foster to adopt placement. I adopted my little girl in October 2020. I do owe my family to Yatom and the rabbi.
When someone supports Yatom, they're supporting the foster parents and their education process and the process for them to have a community in this journey. They're also supporting the diapers and the food and the daycare and the doctors and the dentists and the countless needs from car seats to school supplies.
Jared and I have known that we wanted to foster or adopt for a while, but we were just so overwhelmed by all the information that was out there and all the different resources that we actually found it difficult to start our own research because of it. So when we found Yatom, we were pleasantly surprised because it includes those Jewish values that are so important to us and are already such a through line in our life.
It's so vital that the Jewish community have a organization that focuses on the needs of adoptive families, foster care families. The micro grants were helpful to us, and I'm sure are helpful to so many others.
Many people are ready to foster and or adopt. And if you are, we have a family fellowship to support that journey. Others are not ready to do that, but there's ways you can support families that are doing that. You can reach out to us. Maybe you have something to offer the educational process, pro bono legal work. Maybe you have medical expertise you can offer to our families. Maybe you're an educator or understand developmental delays and you can offer mentorship to families. Please reach out because we need all forms of support.
Yatom really gave us a space to not only talk about adoption and foster care, but really let out our emotions and our fears and trepidations along the whole process.
Hi everyone, we're Rafi and Lauren Glazer from Kehilat Pardes in Aspen Hill, Maryland. We participated in Yatom Fellowship to learn more about the fostering process.
When we completed the fellowship, we were eager to open our home and have since been joined by a 12-year-old boy. Yatom provided us with the means to get bedrooms set up and create a more welcoming home for our newest member. Thanks to Yatom, we were able to offer a warm and safe place for our foster son. Thank you, Yatom, for helping us turn this idea into a reality.
But is our community doing enough to talk about foster kids? What is every synagogue in this country doing to say, we're gonna be a part of this? We're gonna celebrate foster kids who enter our community. We're gonna support foster families. We're gonna be a healing process. For 700,000 kids go in the foster care system a year. What is our community gonna do about that?
Rav Shmuly, thank you for the incredible work that you are doing at Yatom and in all the other things that you do, bettering the lives of individuals and entire communities through your work. We're so touched, so inspired by your work tonight. I'd like to turn now and invite you to continue to watch as we view a discussion of our three amazing rabbis tonight, friends of mine, colleagues, among so many others, doing this important work here at YCT and beyond. Panel, which will be moderated by Abigail Pogrebin, the author of Stars of David, Prominent Jews Talk About Being Jewish, and My Jewish Year, 18 Holidays, One Wandering Jew, which was a finalist for the 2017 National Jewish Book Award. A former Emmy-nominated producer for 60 Minutes, she and Rabbi Dov Linzer were co-hosts for the Tablet Magazine podcast Parsha in Progress, which broadcast bi-weekly for 2 whole years. Abby moderates public conversations for the Stryker Center, Shalom Hartman Institute, and the JCC in Manhattan. She's the immediate past president of Central Synagogue in New York. And of course, she's joined by our 3 rabbis, who we've learned a little about already and hope to learn more from as the evening continues. Rabbi Ari Hart, Rabbi of Skokie Valley Agudath Jacob in Chicago, Illinois, a community activist influencing so many people around him. Rabbi Mishael Zion, the director of the Mandel Program for Leadership in Jewish Culture and co-founder and senior faculty of YCT's Beit Midrash for Rabbinic Leadership in Israel. And Rabbi Shmuly Yanklowitz, president and dean of the Valley Beit Midrash in Scottsdale, Arizona, and the founder of Yatom.
Thank you so much, Yonah. It is a privilege to be here and to be with this incredible set of alumni of YCT. Rav Shmuly, I would love to start with you. On the website of YCT, it says, maybe you haven't read it recently, but it says, our rabbis are a breath of fresh air for the Jewish community. Why did we need this fresh breath? Where were we maybe not breathing as refreshingly, as innovatively, as relevantly as we maybe should be? How do you interpret that idea?
You know, it's an amazing question. And in the pandemic now, we reflect on how interconnected our breath is and how we all share one planet. We all share the same breath. And yet what's also so interesting is that we need different air. The air feels like it's universalistic, but the air we breathe, we need a different spiritual air. And some of us don't fit into some boxes. Some of us don't fit in some cultures. And I know for myself, I would not have become a rabbi if Chovevei hadn't existed. Like, I needed what Chovevei had to offer. It's not for some people, but for me and for many others, we wouldn't be on this path without it. And the most important part for Chovevei.
Before you leave that, why? What do you mean you wouldn't have been a rabbi without YCT? Like, really drill down on that for a second.
I needed a culture that was deeply committed to Torah and Avodat Hashem, serving God and loving Torah and mitzvot, but also was radically open. A space where we could talk openly, we could debate openly, we could innovate, we could challenge. To have that combination of deeply rooted and radically open, that was something I was craving and I couldn't find anywhere else.
And before I leave you, in your wonderful video, you end with a question that, to me, having watched you for over a decade, encapsulates your rabbinate. Maybe you'll think it's 2 on 1 foot, but the line you finish with is a question: what is our community going to do about that? And I feel like that's what you're asking over and over again. whether we're talking about adoption, whether we're talking about veganism and responsibility to the earth, whether we're talking about organ donation, whether we're talking about poverty, whether we're talking about the immigrant. It's what is our community going to do about that? And I think that's not necessarily the obvious question for rabbis in training. It's what you know, it's what you study, it's what you master. It's not necessarily what you're going to do. So help us understand. Am I right that that's an animating question for you?
It really is. You know, I've spent a lot of time in the book of Jonah, the only book in Tanakh that ends with a question. And I really try to live with the question, a question that is yearning for beyond, a question that is pushing us to stretch ourselves. When I was a kid and even a young adult, I thought there were adults in the room who would take care of everything. And what Chovevei taught me is we need to go out there and fill those gaps. We need to raise those questions. We need to fill the gap between reality and potentiality, that yearning for what the world can be. And I feel deep sadness when I see the Jewish people not on the front lines of pressing moral issues. And I feel deep pride when I do see us there. And thankfully, we're doing so much. And thankfully, also, there's infinite amount of work still to do. And so when it comes to the vulnerable in particular, I feel that our community is doing so well and can do so much more. And I want to play a small part in collaborating on that.
Thank you. Rob Mish, you had this wonderful video that actually had two snapshots of my rabbi, Angela Buchdahl from Central Synagogue. And it just, to me, just confirmed an approach that you've clearly taken, that our teachers are everywhere, that you have obviously chosen to teach a certain way, to study a certain way, to impart Judaism to your students a certain way, but you're not closing the door on those who are in different denominations and have different approaches. I was lucky enough to listen to your amazing podcast, Hineni, which you did during the pandemic before the high holidays. And they were just extraordinary conversations with Rabbi Noah Kushner and Rabbi Sharon Cohen Anisfeld and Art Green. And to me, it's, I'll show my bias here, like that's what makes me want to be in this conversation, is that you're saying, let's all come together around study and around these issues, even if we're not davening the same way. So can you explain maybe how does YCT fit into that approach of inviting others in?
So I actually remember the first time I was about to go to be interviewed by Edgar Bronfman. At my first job, I just finished Chovevei, and I was being interviewed to be the co-director of the Bronfman Fellowships. And Rav Avi called me. He's like, Mish, I just want to talk you through some points. He was always very aware of our placement and where we could be. And so on. He was very excited about this position, which I ended up receiving and working there for 7 years. And he said, Edgar's going to ask you, why does he need an Orthodox rabbi? He's not Orthodox. And he said, you should answer whatever you want, but let me tell you what I answer when people ask me that. He says, I'm an Orthodox person, but I'm a rabbi for all of Am Yisrael. And I think that perspective is really important. I think in everything I've done, both in America and in Israel, Baruch Hashem, I've had, Shmuly was talking about the two hands, the commitment and the openness. And I think a lot about how I have the shul that I belong to and that I helped found. And that's a shul where we are modern Orthodox families, davening together, living together, keeping Shabbat together, keeping holidays together, keeping halakha together. But with my other hand, I'm deeply connected to the wider Israeli society. And I work with cultural leaders who are secular, who are Reform, who are Ethiopian, who are Russian, here in Israel, all kinds of walks of life. And the same thing in America. I had my Orthodox community and I have my Am Yisrael community. And those things can never go against each other. They always have to go hand in hand. I'll also say something else, sort of, I find it kind of boring to be just in one of those worlds. If I'm just in the wider world, I love it, but I miss a person I can talk to about real Torah. Or deeper Torah. Again, not to be judgmental, but just to say, like, there's a commitment when you're rigorous about studying Torah. There's a certain conversation you can have, and when you're committed seriously to be belonging to of the world and to Klal Yisrael, there's another conversation to have. I need to live in a world where I can speak both of those conversations.
And it struck me when you were talking to Rab Avi about wanting to take essentially this language to Israel, and you said, "Don't worry, the translation is on me." Which I love that line. What has that translation been? Like, what's the difference between kind of the YCT frame in America and Israel? I know it's a big question, but if you can encapsulate it.
I have to admit that I thought the difference was smaller when I was coming out. I had grown up in Yerushalayim, and you live in Yerushalayim, half the time you're speaking English anyway these days. And I thought the difference wasn't so acute. And what I discovered very quickly was the more time I was spending in New York, the more Israeli I felt. And the more time I now spend in Israel, the more I know that Israelis have so much to learn from North American Jews. And one of the things specifically that Israelis have to learn from North American Jewry is the community rabbi. It's just a model that we don't have in Israel in that way. And the great community rabbis in Israel are all from America. And yet what I don't want to do is just do a copy paste of American rabbinate to Israelis, because Israeli Judaism is its own unique story, just like American Judaism is its own unique story. Part of what I sometimes feel is that I'm helping, as an Israeli, I can help American Jews realize just how unique and special and meaningful their own Judaism is without having to apologize for not being Israeli, which they don't. And at the same time, I can also recognize how deep and meaningful Israeli Judaism is, and that chevruta is really what's pushing Jewish life forward in so many ways.
Wonderful. Rav Ari, you mentioned, and I loved your honesty here, that you had struggled with your emunah, with your faith, that you weren't getting answers. How did YCT help you find them?
YCT, as Rav Shmuly said, allowed us to ask the questions. Growing up, I was, as I shared in the video, a very deeply spiritual kid. The year the Bulls went 72-10 here in Chicago, I was pretty sure that it was actually my davening, which had a big part of that successful season. But that was kind of
my husband is from there, so that's a religion in our house.
It was in the video originally, and then I thought it's a New York video, might be some sensitive Knicks fans, so we took it out. But that was kind of an immature faith, right? That's a childish faith. And when I had more mature questions as I grew older, I didn't find places and sources and rabbis and teachers that I could really connect to. And it was the first time I stepped into that Beit Midrash at Chovevei that I realized this is a place where the questions are on the table and they're being answered with thoughtfulness and sensitivity and rigor and authenticity. And I just fell in love. And some of those questions I've answered, some I still haven't. I'm still searching. And that's also part of what I love about Chovevei. It's a place that doesn't demand you leave with, the set answers to all the questions. It's an ongoing conversation.
And what's also come through in your rabbinate is a sense of having to, in some way, activate your Torah values, that we can't just sit with them and study them and absorb them. Right. We have to somehow act upon them, make them real in the world. You said, there's one quote in the video, we have to be out there. And I think I know what you mean, but I'd love you to kind of unpack that a little more. What does that mean to you? We rabbis have to.
Yeah. Well, I learned this from my teachers, right? At Chovevei, Rav Avi, certainly a trailblazer in this, right? And also from my fellow students, Rav Shmuly, Rabbi Mike Schultz, others who, when I entered, were just modeling this deep engagement with Torah and with the world. And I learned a lot from all of them. And for me, what it means is to take these lofty values that we have, to love the ger, to love our neighbor, to, even just values of Shabbat, of rest, values of environmental concerns that we have in our Torah, all these beautiful, beautiful teachings that we have. How are we actualizing them? Are we just speaking about them? Are we actualizing them within, the walls of a shul or a Beit Midrash? Or are we making them real in the world? Just last week, it's been very cold here in the winter, and there are homeless people on the streets. I mean, it was like -4 for a week straight here, and snow, and it's just terrible. And because of COVID, shelters are not safe, so more and more people are sleeping out on the streets. So our shul organized a caravan to bring warmth, just literal warmth, warm food, warm blankets, warm hand warmers to people who are living it on the streets, because we have values in the Torah of feeding the hungry and of clothing the naked and of being concerned for those who are most vulnerable in our society. And it was amazing. You had like 50 families, this whole operation to gather this stuff and caravan down and deliver it. And that's, to me, part of what it means. It means we take the values that we talk about in shul and we directly translate them to things that are happening in the world. And I'm actually really excited. We're actually launching a new initiative called Solu, which is going to be an effort to do that on a systemic way, to really create systems to constantly be engaging our shul members
in service work to reach out to the most vulnerable, the most oppressed, and to try to bring help and care to those who need it based on our Torah values.
Rav Shmuly, that's wonderful. Rav Shmuly, I want you to respond to one other piece of language that's on the YCT, kind of like who we are. And it says our students are trained to become inspiring and motivating teachers of Torah, sensitive and responsible poskim for their communities. I want to just zero in on the word sensitive. I assume that doesn't mean some kind of crunchy, touchy feel. Maybe it does. I don't want to put words in your mouth. That there's some actually something with a little more teeth in that word, sensitive. And what does that mean to you? And how would you say you've translated it yourself into your?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I just want to say how inspired I am. Abby, I'm inspired by your great work, and I'm inspired by my colleagues here. It's an amazing thing when your friends are also your rabbis. You know, if I lived in Chicago, I'd be at Rav Ari Shul. If I lived in Yerushalayim, I'd be at Rav Mishi Shul. And they model exactly this word of sensitive. And the sensitivity is not something you turn on and off. It's something that has to run throughout our lives. The way we pray, the way we talk, the way we engage with our children and with our seniors. And for me, what it means is that we feel the Ribbono Shel Olam everywhere we go. We feel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we feel the divine presence everywhere we are, and that deepens our awareness and the depth of the reality around us. And when we encounter another human being, we see the godliness within them. And because we see that, it startles us, it pauses us, it pulls us back to an awareness, a radical alterity, an awareness of the other, in a way where we are both intrigued and present to them in the ideal state. And so that sensitivity is to see that divinity in them makes them unique and makes us obligated to them and makes us pause to truly listen. Their story is unlike anyone else's story. This text is unlike any other text. It's to see every moment as unique, every person as unique. And so that presence of the divinity, I think, is what moves me towards thinking of the sensitivity, that we treat each person as an ends in themselves.
Beautiful. And Rav, you said a word that's often we're not kind of courageous enough to say, I think, in Jewish life, which is boredom. And we know that a lot of people have it, and they're often silent about it, sort of silently suffering. And those of us who have sort of found the electricity wish that we could beget it to others. But where do you think we're not honest enough about where we're losing people? And how would you say part of the YCT training is not oriented to bells and whistles and kind of trying to get people to kind of be lured by things that aren't rooted deeply in Judaism, but where are we kind of not facing the truth about people who are disaffected or detached?
I mean, I think we keep asking ourselves that question in so many ways, and the truth is, looking at it from an Israeli perspective is very different from looking at it from a North American perspective. The sense, I think, again, is that in North America, often we're aware of who's not with us. In Israel, they're with us, but what are they thinking about? And where are they taking it? Where are they taking our Judaism, our next generation? I think at the end of the day, the focus that I learned at Chovevei is the focus on relationships. And whenever your focus is, first of all, relationships, you're already relevant to people's lives. And I think that the more we are in our urban life, in our highly technological life, COVID has, made this even more aware that it's really hard to maintain meaningful, real, authentic relationships, non-utilitarian relationships. And that's what having a kehillah is about, and a kehillah kedosha is about. So a rabbi is an engine of relationships. Now, you wouldn't think that if you studied, to be a rabbi somewhere else. You'd think a rabbi is an engine of making sure people follow halakha, and that is true. But what if halakha is about having relationships? Right? What if halakha is about having a relationship with Kodesh Baruch Hu, having a proper relationship with your wife, with the people who are different from you, than with your children? If you put the relationships at the center, then suddenly it becomes extremely relevant. And I think that's the key to so much of it. I'll just say very briefly that the parsha we just read over Shabbat, Parashat Kitisa, is all about relationships, about how relationships can go wrong with the golden calf. I want it all now, and if I want it all now, then it's going to go wrong. But if I can say I can wait to build the real relationships, the deep relationships, That's what it's about, and that's where rabbis should be. And what's amazing about the parsha is that God says, you know what, I don't really want to have a relationship with the Jewish people anymore. I've had enough. You, Moshe, you have a relationship with them. I'm going. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, no, I'm not leaving you until you don't have a relationship with the Jewish people. So being a rabbi, Moshe Rabbeinu, following in Moses' footsteps, is about making sure not only that the Jewish people have a relationship with each other and with God, it's making sure that God has a relationship with us. And that's really hard work. We can only do it together, I think.
If I can just jump in on the question of sensitivity and relationships and psak, this is something that comes up for me as a community rabbi. I get all kinds of questions. And there's always the question behind the question, right? There's always the halachic question, and then there's 99% of the time something going on beneath it. I'm just thinking of, there was a woman in the community who would call a lot and ask a lot of she'ilot about kashrut, and seemingly things that were like, my meat dish towel touched my dairy dish towel is the treif, right? Kind of like very strict, and I was always sort of puzzled by them, and I'd always, just answer, it's fine, it's not fine, do this, do that. And then I realized every time she asked me one of those questions, she would mention her mother. She would say, in my mother's kitchen, it was like this, and now I did this. What do you think? And one time in the conversation, I just asked her, you've mentioned your mother a lot in these questions, like, tell me about your mother. And it opened up a whole new dimension of our relationship. And, it took me a couple tries to get there of just answering the question back and forth. But after I kind of picked up, this is about something much deeper than just, the meat towel touching the dairy towel. This is about a relationship with a mother, and it's about loss, and it's about love, and it's about Jewish connection, and all these things bound together. And we had an amazing, powerful conversation about her relationship with her mom. And that relationship now is so much deeper and so much more real and holistic and beautiful because of that. So halacha and sensitivity, sometimes it means giving the psak that's sensitive to the person, but sometimes it means also just like going to the question beneath the question and finding the human and finding the story, as Rav Shmuly said, the narrative, the unique divine imprint in every human being, and trying to engage that when dealing with halachic questions.
I'd love to ask all of you, just because we're talking about relationship, to just tell us a little bit about the relationship you have with each other and with your fellow these cohorts through the years of YCT. It's like your own species, at least for those of us on the outside. That's how it looks. And that you're not just keeping track of each other, but you're constantly kind of feeding each other, it sounds like. Can you just give us a sense of that, and feel free to talk to each other about it?
I mean, I just have to share one memory I have from studying at Chovevei. We were, the yeshiva was still in Manhattan at the Columbia Hillel. I was walking with one of my kids up Riverside Drive next to Riverside Park, and I see Shmuly running, just sort of lumbering down, jogging, and I was just like, that for me, that image, I'm sorry, Shmuly, of you jogging was just like, I was like, how does he have time for everything, right? Whenever I feel like I'm not doing enough, I think about Shmuly just running down, jogging down Riverside Drive. And I think that sense of urgency that we got from our teachers, from Rev Dov Linzer, from Dr. Michelle Friedman, from Rabbi Avi Weiss, from Rabbi Sessler Katz, so many great teachers that gave us the urgency that we need to, connect Torah and life in so many ways. When I think what I've learned from Ari and what I've learned from Shmuly, it's that translating that urgency into life in so many ways. It's dizzying, and it keeps us in shape, I guess, or at least it keeps Shmuly in shape.
One of you want to respond to that, the idea of the YCT tribe?
Well, I can just say, being on this event and knowing that I was joining Rav Mish and Rav Shmuly, it was a little humbling. These are my teachers. Rav Mish was my teacher in Yerushalayim, maybe, 15 years ago. And I can still remember sitting down for a shawarma with you and talking about the rabbit. And I think it was actually your wife was you had to run to the hospital. It was like your first child. I very vividly remember that. And I've always looked up to Rav Mish and his Torah, and he's been a teacher of mine, and for many years. And Rav Shmuly is someone who I have a deep admiration, long-standing, and respect, and deep connection with. I still remember the first time I met Rav Shmuly at the Northwestern Hillel right here in Evanston. He was the mashgiach for Pesach, and he sat me down. I was just about to start Chovevei. He was like, "There's this thing called Uri L'Tzedek which we're starting." And I was just taken, so inspired, and I continue to be just deeply inspired by his activism and his leadership. So this call for me was like a little bit of katonti, a feeling of a little being humbled by these awesome friends and leaders. And same with the rest of the Chevra. It's really an amazing resource, the Chovevei network. I'm still in touch with people from my class, with other rabbis in Chicago. We're blessed. I think I have 7 musmachim here. So that's like an amazing resource. There's a WhatsApp group with Rav Linzer. Shoot him his questions and responses that I'm a very avid reader of. I call all my rabbis. I call Dr. Friedman when I have a pastoral concern. I call Rav Avi when I need a little bit of courage. I call Rav Linzer when I have a shayla. I call Rabbi Love when I have Love. I call, it's such an amazing community, amazing resource, and it's very much a part of my life today, and I think will always be.
There's so much I received from Chovevei in so many regards, and yet, without a doubt, the deepest were the friendships and the models that I had, of which Rav Misha and Rav Ari represent the best of living with humility and living with kindness. And each of us has our avoda and our spiritual work cut out for us. And one of mine has always been, as Rami said, that I'm kind of running. For better and worse, I'm running. And Chovevei actually taught me how to slow down in addition to running, how to feel the savlanut, the patience, along with the zrizut, the alacrity. And when I think of Rav Ari, I think of him like, I know I've never told him this, but like a ninja. Because what a ninja is able to do is they're very good in their timing. They're very good in their timing, and Rav Ari has this patience, and then he knows right in the moment when to say something or when to respond or when to act. And I've always watched him and admired that ability. And Rav Misha arrived at Chovevei with such a humility. He had already learned so much. He didn't need another smicha, but he came curious. And whenever he would approach me or I would approach him, he approached with questions. He approached with intrigue rather than just trying to have an influence. And these two, have influenced me so deeply over the last 15 years. And I don't know how to thank Chovevei and the supporters enough that I was given the gift of being able to learn in that Beit Midrash and have continued channels where I can learn from these type of rabbis.
Well, that is the perfect note to end on. I am so grateful to all 3 of you, and a shout out to Miriam and Yonah, who were my taskmasters for this event. And I also have to just give kavod to Rabbi Dov Linzer, who was my podcast partner for 2 years for a Tablet Magazine podcast. He was someone who, as you all know, it really is incomparable in his learning and in his friendship and his generosity. I'm a fan of YCT, though no journalist should admit their partiality. I think the Jewish world is lucky for all of you. So thank you.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you
so much, Abby.
What a joy and an honor to say a few words at the 25th celebration of Chovevei, and specifically to say a few words about my colleagues, about Mish and Shmuly and Ari. Memories, wonderful memories. Mish, I remember at your Chag HaSmicha, the way you stood in front of the Aron Kodesh and you faced the Aron, your back was towards us, and you started speaking out so beautifully, Ana Avda Tekucha Berichu. Ana Avda Tekucha Berichu. Ana Avda Tekucha Berichu. And Mish, my dear Mish, the Torah that you're bringing to Medinat Yisrael is the Torah of Ana Avda Tekucha Berichu. It's a Torah of love. It's a Torat Ahava, the way that can be given only the way Mish Tzion can give it. Your mamish so central in the saving of the teaching of Torah at Medinat Yisrael. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Shmuly, memories in front of the United Nations, busted as we raised the voice of moral conscience when the president of Iran was in town. Memories of you debating the heads of the Jewish community on Rubashkin from the OU. And I could still see you calling out in the streets, O Davinu Chai, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai. That's your Torah. Your Torah, Shmuly, is a Torah of Torat Chaim, translating Torah into a deep, deep sensitivity and Jewish commitment, balancing with a universal consciousness. It's Chayami. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Ari, my dear, dear Ari, Kishmo Kachu, it's your name, Ari. Your Torah is the Torat Ari, the Torah of Or. It's the Torah of light. What wonderful, wonderful memories I have of you not only being an activist. People know about that sensitivity, your ability to listen, even the way you walk with a humility. But more attention should be paid to your brilliance, Ari. My memory of you are many memories, was you giving a drasha at the Bayit, and I had been at the Bayit for over 40 years, and when you finished, I got a standing ovation. I said, "Ooh, what is this? A standing ovation." You touched on topics only the way you can. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's your niggin, Ari. We sang it under your chuppah, do you remember? Amen. 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 Sing it over. And to see Chovevei where it's at now, Rav Dov, I'm so grateful to you. To you, Ruthie, I get emotional when I think about it. It's such a blessing to have been part of the creation of something and then to be able to step back and to see it in better hands, stronger hands, more visionary hands. I thank you. And I want to thank all of the Chevra, almost 200 of us. I want to thank all of you. And I want to offer this bracha to you. You know, when a Talmud is in the yeshiva, often students look at their Rebbeim and they say, I want to emulate the Rebbe. There are characteristics, there's a style of the Rebbe that I want to imitate. I've reached the time with the passage of years, B'ezrat Hashem, when I look at all of you and I say from the bottom of my heart, I want to emulate you. I'm learning from you. You're paving the way, blazing a new path. It's your time. And I bless you in the words of the Gemara, Yehi Ratzon. May it be God's will. Shekol nitiyot shenotim imcha. All the saplings, all the souls that you touch in your myriad of ways, Yehu kimotcha. May they gain from you, grow from you, forever and ever. And what's a little bracha without a little niggin? So this is for my Mishael. This is for my Shmuel and my Arala, my Dovela, my Rosh HaYeshiva, Ruthie, for all of you. Ilan, Ilan, Bama Avarechicha, Bama Avarechicha. Tree, oh tree, how shall I bless you? Bama Avarechicha. Yehi Ratzon Shekol Netiyot Shenotim Mimcha Yiyu Kemocha. May it be God's will, all that comes from you. May May all the saplings, all the people we reach, may they be like you. Blessings and deepest love, Likulchem. Mazal Tov. Love you.
Rav Avi, we love you. Thank you for your warm words. It's really exciting to see so many of you here this evening, and especially the faces I don't recognize. Thank you all for celebrating with us this evening, for your loyalty, support, and enthusiasm for YCT. The strength you give us not only carried us through this past year, but continues to inspire us to work even harder. I'd like to share a few highlights about how we have operated during these challenging times and express some words of gratitude. We made a smooth transition to the virtual space for our Beit Midrash and Smicha programs and are so proud of our students who continue to learn with the same zest and investment as they did in person. Special Mazel Tov to this year's graduates, Hodi Nemis, Aaron Portman, and Kyle Savage. Our faculty, many of whom have been teaching for decades, adjusted to the virtual platform and continue to find innovative ways of teaching. They've also remarkably maintained the personal relationships with our students despite the physical distance. Our staff became more strategic, more collaborative, and even more creative, as I'm sure you have witnessed with all the activity coming out of YCT. And I really hope you'll stay tuned for upcoming programs. We have expanded our alumni support through increased outreach to them and hosting process groups around the challenges of leadership during this time. We'd also like to acknowledge our board, and in particular, our board chair, Dr. Ken Prager, Chair Emeritus Steve Lieberman, and Secretary Ari Hart for their efforts in advancing the yeshiva. One thing we're particularly proud of this year is the way in which we strengthened our ties with YCT-led communities and communities across the globe. By partnering with our alumni on new initiatives and expanding our virtual learning opportunities and public programming, we've been able to bring our distinct Torah into your homes. Tonight, we especially welcome those of you who are celebrating with the YCT family for the first time, and we look forward to your continued friendship and engagement. All of these achievements were made possible through your financial support and our extraordinary team of faculty and staff whose dedication and devotion to our mission drives our continued success. Please join me for 5 seconds of applause for their efforts. And now it is my absolute privilege, bracha, and honor to introduce our president and Rosh HaYeshiva and my friend, Rabbi Dov Linzer, whose clear vision and humble leadership has enabled and inspired YCT to flourish. Rabbi Linzer.
Thank you, Ruthie, for your kind words. You have just heard from 3 of our remarkable rabbis, each one an innovative leader in his own right. Rabbi Ari Hart, a shaper of a Torah and activist community. Rav Shmuly, a passionate champion of justice and of people, fighting for the most vulnerable with caring and compassion. And Rabbi Mishael Zion, heading a program which mentors Israeli rabbis so that they too can become leaders with a broad and open vision. I am so proud of the incredible work that they do. Indeed, I am equally proud of the 150 YCT rabbis we currently have working in the field. Rabbis who share our values. Rabbis who promote a religious life that is joyful and uplifting. Everyone here has felt the power of our rabbis, whether as a teacher of Torah, or as a pulpit rabbi, or as an educator of your child in school or on college campuses, or as a chaplain when you are hospitalized. For 20 years, our rabbis have been teaching a caring, relevant Torah, inspiring and supporting individuals and families, and transforming communities and Jewish life. But after 20 years, what now? The world continues to change, and YCT must grow and change with it. Our rabbinical school has a secret sauce, and it is clear to us that we can and must find a way to bring that secret sauce to the larger Jewish community. Let me ask you now to close your eyes and to dream with me for a minute. Imagine what it would be for YCT to expand beyond a rabbinical school. Imagine YCT as a center of Torah and Torah leadership. A Torah leadership that is vision-driven, compassionate, and people-centered. Consider Keter, a new certificate program bringing the essence of YCT's Torah and engagement skills to Jewish educators in the field. Imagine not only 20 YCT rabbis on college campuses, but 200 YCT-trained educators spread throughout North America, connecting with your children and thousands of others. Consider Keter for Rabbis, a rabbinic finishing program for rabbis serving in the pulpit and in other areas, and for those in other denominations, which brings to them the Torah, pastoral skills, and relationship building that they never received. Wouldn't you want your rabbi, if he isn't YCT ordained, to build and create a welcoming community, to make every individual feel seen and cared for? A center of Torah, a compassionate Torah for a complex world. I would guess that everyone here is thirsty for such a Torah. Picture being able to access a powerful, personal Torah that speaks to enduring human issues and to the burning issues that confront us and the larger world. And all with closed captioning and ASL interpretation. Consider a YCT Kollel for contemporary halachic studies, an intensive high-level learning program which cultivates poskim, halachic authorities, for our community. What would it mean to be able to turn to poskim who share our values for halachic guidance and to help shape the halachic and religious direction of our community? I now want to ask you to turn your attention back to our rabbinical school. Think of a newly designed rabbinical program to train all students, whether those headed for the pulpit or for serving the larger Jewish community, with the skills of engagement and entrepreneurship concretized through project-based learning. Think of how they will become transformative leaders. How many more exciting initiatives will result? How many more people will be engaged and inspired? A center of Torah and Torah leadership with a new and newly imagined rabbinical school at its core. Now open your eyes. For what you have been imagining is no dream. This is YCT 2.0. As Herzl said, Im tirtzu ein zo agada. But we have more than ratzon, more than desire. We have the reality. Over the past 6 months, we have been working hard at developing these programs for launch in September 2021. Those of you who have been part of the YCT mission for the last 20 years, please know that we build this new version of YCT on the foundation that you have laid. And to all of you we say, become part of YCT 2.0. In Vayakel Pikude, we read that the people gave fully of themselves to the building of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle. Some through monetary support, others by investing their talents and energies. So we invite you to help us build our center of Torah and Torah leadership in any way you can, whether it is through monetary investment, by learning more about our programs, or by becoming a champion of this vision in your communities. Join us in this vision. With you and your ongoing enthusiasm, this burgeoning reality will succeed beyond our wildest dreams.
Rabbi Linzer and Ruthie, thank you both for your dynamic leadership, for your unceasing devotion to our yeshiva, to its students, staff, faculty, board members, fans, and constituents around the world. Know that your work is so appreciated by us all. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And on your behalf, I'll take a moment as well to thank Miriam Schachter for all that she did in putting tonight's event together. We look forward now to the future, and we know that YCT's work in its first 2 decades is far from over as it looks beyond. Tonight, I did the math, is our 18th celebration. The first was in 2004. How far we've traveled and how much more there is to do as a community, as a yeshiva, as those who truly cherish all that our Torah has to bring and offer to the world. I invite our members of our leadership society to please stay for the after party on this Zoom. To everyone, I say Laila Tov, thank you so much for joining us, and we can't wait to see you again soon. Have a wonderful evening. Shalom.